save me. Knocking over cups, drinking far too much. Can you mend me, baby? Oh, I ought to know when it's time to go, but that's alright. Baby, it's all that you wanted to do. All that you wanted to do. That's alright. Baby, that's all. Well, that's alright. Lately staying here feels like it's a win. I know it's not a sin. Waking to my television. Well, that's alright. Baby, that's all. All that I wanted to do. Hey. Well, that's alright. It's alright. Baby, that's all. That's all.
Well, good morning, friends. On this Monday, January 25th. Can you believe it's been a month already since Christmas Day? Kind of, wow, there you go. And a month from now, we'll already be 2 weeks past Valentine's Day. Are you in a wind wobble yet? Welcome to Real Talk, and thanks for making time for us. We're excited about today's show. In just a second, we're going to check in with Professor Tim Caulfield, who's a genius and an author. His book, Relax, Damn It. As a matter of fact, I have it here. Sam, we could take camera 4 so I don't drop out of the frame and make things awkward here. And there you go. Look at that.
We have this technology. Oh, you're going to grab your backpack.
We do have the latest technology.
This is how ready we are for the show, ladies and gentlemen.
This is how ready we are. At a moment's notice, we can drop anything and refer to it. Professor Caulfield's new book out, but he's not here to talk about the book.
I got it for Christmas.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah, I did.
What did you make of it?
I've just started it. So far, it's
you got to take.
Oh yeah, we got it back to you. There we
See?
go.
There we go.
Relax, damn it.
Relax, damn it. This is his book, but he's not here to talk about. What did you think? Have you got into it yet?
I got into it a little bit. I think it's just like it's so common sensey. That's what I love about it. I love his writing because it speaks to me on a very, we're too uptight about everything.
Yes,
kind of level.
a user's guide to the age of anxiety. The good professor, though, I think is maybe a little anxious. He gives off a very self-assured vibe. I don't know if he doesn't really scream anxiety to me. Tim does. He more, to me, is the solution provider or the solution suggester. So he's going to talk to us, but it's misinformation that we're talking about today. And he and some fellow scientists have launched a new website. It's just gone up. It's a new social media campaign to counter misinformation around COVID-19. We're going to talk about that. While I have books out, an official announcement coming up later this week. Everybody know this guy? Everybody know Cameron Hughes? The king of cheer, they call him. Maybe you've been to a National Hockey League game, a game in the association, the NBA. He's worked, I think, in the NFL, Major League Baseball. He's been over in Europe. The guy's done a ton of stuff. He's one of these guys, he's like the sleeper in the crowd. He's just sitting there minding his own business, and then all of a sudden they take the shot of him on the Jumbotron, and then he starts to go nuts, and then the crowd realizes that this is a thing, and then he gets the whole place whipped into a frenzy.
I feel like in your other job you've met a few of these characters.
Yes, this is how I met Cameron Hughes in my work in the National Hockey League for the Edmonton Oilers, and he's a master of his craft. He's got a brand new book out, King of Cheer. He's going to join us later this week. So Tim Caulfield coming up. We've also got before 9 o'clock today, we're going to check in with Dr. Ross McKenzie. He's a retired agronomist. He's a research scientist. He worked for Alberta Agriculture for, the better part of his career spanned like almost 40 years. He's very concerned about cuts to research and agriculture. We're going to find out exactly why that matters. That's coming up today in about, we'll call it 17 minutes time. After 9 o'clock today, Rachel Notley. After 9:30, Amarjeet Sohi, former federal minister. Sohi worked the Keystone XL file for the better part of 2 years. So we'll get his take as Canada's, did you see this Canadian diplomat to the United States basically says, this is Kristen Hillman, says it's time to move on. She was talking to, she was on the House on CBC on Saturday and said it's obviously very disappointing, Keystone XL, the decision by the Biden administration, disappointing for Albertans and people in Saskatchewan who are already in a difficult situation, but we need to focus on moving forward with this administration. Meantime, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney on Fox News over the weekend pleading the case for it. He wants to try to keep this, you have to assume, on the radar of Republican senators, probably, Republican representatives in Congress. Jason Kenney continuing to say, listen, as America's closest ally and most important trading partner, we deserve an audience. We deserve consideration. We deserve consultation. And the Biden administration has not given us this. Meantime, Canada's ambassador saying, well, it's time to move on. We're going to get Amarjeet Sohi's take on that. Plus, of course, as someone who was and I assume is close to the Prime Minister, I'm going to get former Minister Sohi's take on the resignation of Governor General Julie Payette. And then in the 10 o'clock hour, this will be interesting. This pod board, it's like you imagine back in the day when you're talking about, albums or singles that were really climbing. You'd pay attention to the Billboard charts, the Billboard Hot 100. Well, the pod board is a new entity. They're based out of Europe. We're going to learn a little bit more about them today after 10 o'clock, but based out of Stockholm, Sweden, London, England. And they've been keeping an eye on trends in podcasting. Now, obviously, that includes us, too. And we're excited for some of the analysis that they've provided on Canada's podcast charts, but that's not exactly why they're on the show today. We're going to talk to the managing director of the Pod Board 100, and that's Podicon as well, which is a conference that they intend to put on once you get through COVID here. But Stephen Brogarth is managing director. They've been keeping an eye on the rise of, I don't know if I want to use the word extremism, but we'll let him break it down for us. But as more and more accounts, controversial or outspoken or extreme personalities have been shut down or shut out of social media, and they're moving into places like Parler, but then Parler gets deplatformed, and you've been following the whole story. Obviously the highest profile individual we're talking about here is Donald Trump, but there are many others as well. Well, it turns out that more and more podcasts are popping up. Now, could this be the new method or the new platform? To reference Marshall McLuhan, is the medium the message here? What does this mean? So Stephen Brogarth of the Podboard 100 will join us. He's going to chime in on Zoom live from Stockholm coming up around 10 o'clock Mountain Time, noon Eastern. So we'll look forward to that. Plus, we're going to get into some of your emails. A ton of you in touch over the weekend. I suppose if the show's going to be called Real Talk, I should make a bit of a confession,
don't you? Yeah.
You know exactly. You know exactly where I'm going. I have a confession about Friday's show. And I'm talking about this past Friday. Did you kind of know that something was up as we were wrapping, as we were heading in hot to Trash Talk, our weekly feature of trash talking, of gripes, of rants and raves from Real Talkers?
Oh, you're asking me. No, I didn't.
You were none the wiser.
Well, I'm pretty zoned into the show when we come into stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it's.
So you'll notice we're going a lot of our show is like, here we are, and we're sponsored by a Bitcoin company. We've got solar sponsors, and we stream live on YouTube, and we have a Patreon, and everything's new media, new digital. But there are some things about the show that are still analog, very much analog. And now I'd like to show you my new folder. This is my analog folder, and you can see there at the top it says Trash Talk. And the reason that I have this folder is because I got burned on Friday. I got burned big time, where we rolled in hot to Trash Talk. Sam did his exact job. He teed up the music beautifully, and I headed in and I picked up the stack of emails and I started reading them in my Trash Talk voice. Here's Trash Talk. Except I realized relatively quickly that the emails I was reading were remarkably reasonable. and not at all angry. They weren't complaining, really. I mean, they were making arguments, strong arguments based on facts, and so they were going on at length. Typically, trash talk's quick and punchy. These weren't, and but I was still reading them like this. And as I got to the second one, my brain is thinking like there's what's coming out of my mouth, but then there's also what's going on in my brain, and my brain's thinking, I don't think these are the trash talk emails. And it turns out they weren't. But I was so deep into it, and I'm also kind of like in the moment, but I'm kind of scanning the table, and because of my own disorganization, I confess this to you, Real Talkers. Friday's Trash Talk was a Trash Talk edition of non-Trash Talk emails, which means
So it was reasoned argument talk.
it was reasoned argument. It was like if it was to follow the theme of local waste, it would be like, dumpster diatribe. That's what it would have been called. But it wouldn't have
Compost bin.
Yeah, compost chat. Something like that. It was a little more dialed back. Well, it means I have all these, I won't say venomous, but strongly worded emails left over. And so I'm wondering if at some point today or some point this week, maybe we get like a bonus edition of it. Maybe we do some, we can do whatever we like, really, Sam, can't we? So, if you wrote in, because I know some of you wrote in these scathing indictments of politicians and processes and some of the things in society around you that just drive you nuts, and you're going, I thought my email was pretty good. I thought my email would have cracked trash talk this week. Well, there may be a bonus edition coming right up. We're going to get to Professor Caulfield in just a second. Of course, as mentioned, this program's title sponsor is Bitcoin Well, and we're grateful for their sponsorship. In 2021, more and more people may be looking to hit reset on how they invest, where they store their cash, what's right for them. Now, you got to ask all the right questions, and that starts with going to the experts at Bitcoin Well. They're based out of Edmonton, but obviously offer service across Canada. It's the easiest and safest way to buy and sell Bitcoin. You can check them out by linking to their website under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, as mentioned, he is a good friend of this show. He's a professor of health law and science policy. He's a speaker. He's a TV host. He's got a great series on Netflix. He's the author of books including Relax, Damn It. But that is not what he's here to talk about. He's launched a new project this morning, as a matter of fact, Battling Misinformation. It's a real pleasure to welcome to the program Professor Timothy Caulfield. A good Monday morning to you, my friend, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. First of all, the books, we bring you on and then we say, we're not here to talk about your book, but obviously we want to remind people that it's available. It's been out for what, like about a month now or so, a month and a half, maybe?
Just over a month. That's right. Yeah.
So how do you do, typically you'd do a book tour. You'd be all over the country. How does a guy launch a book in the COVID era?
It's pretty weird, Ryan. It's a little bit different, and I love getting out there. So it's a kind of disappointing that you can't really meet the readers and chat with them. But you do the virtual thing, and it's been great. It's been great, and I really do appreciate all the support I get across the country. So yeah, I really do miss the in-person stuff, though. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can't say enough about how excited I am to get back into what we might understand to be normal. Let's get to what you've launched, you as part of a group today, ScienceUpFirst.com. Tell us about this. It says Together Against Misinformation. You've got the pennant behind you there that says Yay Science. You've got the pennant on the website on the homepage, Science Up First. I think it's probably a pretty obvious question, but what prompted this?
Look, you know the answer. There's so much misinformation out there. You tackle it all the time on your show, Ryan. It really is a national and to be honest with you, we hope an international initiative just to push back against the misinformation. And there's really good evidence out there that one of the things that's needed is more content on social media that's accurate. So the goal of this initiative, pretty straightforward, Ryan. We want to flood social media with the good stuff, right? So this is a coalition of researchers, of science communicators, of health policy experts, of public health experts, of education experts, just people who are passionate about this to circulate the good stuff. And Ryan, we want to invite everyone to join. So all you have to do is go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, and join Science Up First. Hashtag Science Up First. And join the fight against misinformation.
What's your biggest hill to climb right now? Is it around vaccinations?
Absolutely, and in fact, that's the first thing we're focusing on is the misinformation circulating around vaccines. And look, we've talked about this before. We know this matters. This isn't a little thing, right? There's good evidence that misinformation around vaccines is having a tangible impact, right? It really is having impact. There's been a cluster of studies that have shown exactly that. So we're going to start pushing hard on the misinformation around vaccines. No, it doesn't cause infertility. No, it's not going to change your DNA. Yes, there is good data on efficacy. Yes, there's good data on safety. We're going to really just try to get all that good information out there. And we also want to listen. We want to listen to people's concerns, but this is really a battle against misinformation.
So is this, geez, because people outside of, the circle that follow Alberta politics are not going to smirk immediately at this word or at these words, because typically in past they've served a purpose. But when I invoke the use of war room now, I know some people are going to kind of smirk and smile. In a way, though, the purpose of a war room has been to advance an interest or combat misinformation or misconceptions or inconvenient narratives. Is this a war room? I mean, how is it actually going to work? Are people going to be monitoring information online, confronting it firsthand? Are people going to have an opportunity to ask questions? How does this play out?
Well, it's interesting to use the war analogy, and it really kind of is a war. So on one hand, that is accurate. On the other hand, we want to be constructive, right? We want to make sure that this isn't all about sort of unilaterally fighting information. We do want to engage the public and listen to what their concerns are. So the way it's going to work is we have, top experts. Really, we have the person who is running COVID, the coalition of scientists across country, vetting information. And so what we're doing is we're trying to get the good content, the accurate content, and we're going to have it available for people to share. We just want to make it really simple. So that's one thing we're doing. The second thing we're doing is we want to make Science Up First a place that people can go to get information if they have questions about this. Look, Ryan, in Alberta, only 48% of Albertans have said they're going to get the vaccine right away. A hard 20% have said no. That's just ridiculous, right? We've got to turn that around. There's good information out there. Let's listen to what your concerns are. I don't believe all these people are hardcore anti-vaxxers. I just think there's just so much noise out there. Let's get some clarity. Let's share the good stuff. Let's work together to beat this.
Yeah, I've got a friend who I trust and respect and know to be intelligent. And I was talking to her a while ago, and I said, "Are you going to get the vaccine?" She said, "I don't think so." I said, "How come?" She said, "Well, I don't even really know what's in it." And I said, "Do you know what's in Tylenol? Like, do you know what's in cough syrup? Do you know what's in anything? Do you know what's in, half the booze you drink? Like, not really. I just, but at the same time, you find in these conversations, you also don't want to be, come across as an asshole, basically, as condescending. Like, I think there's a big, so I was paying attention to some conversations online over the weekend, people talking about QAnon and saying, one of the worst things really that you can do in confronting some of these people on what they believe or their conspiracy theories is to be a jerk to them and make them feel stupid and make them feel ostracized, because it sort of plays into what they've been told. It's the martyr complex. What they've been told is going to happen. Does that apply here too?
It sure does, and that's an excellent point. I had this list of things that you should do to fight misinformation, and I can't remember. I think it's like number 5 is be nice. Be nice. Yeah. Be humble. Be empathetic. But it can be really, really hard, Ryan, because some of this stuff is so absurd, and we have to remember people are dying. This is like not a little issue. So sometimes it can be hard not to be confrontational. But we do need to listen. And the other thing that's really important to remember is I don't really believe, I talked about that 20% that is, saying no. I don't believe they're all hardcore denialists. There are people just trying to do the right thing, and there's just so much noise out there, it gets confusing. So, we hope that this project will help individuals cut through the noise and get to the good stuff.
So this, I suppose, to a certain degree, this is a grassroots movement. You want the public to push this out. So somebody sees on their own personal Facebook feed a friend asserting that that the COVID-19 vaccine is going to cause autism or something along those lines. Is this when we put up the spotlight with the Batman silhouette in the sky and in comes Professor Caulfield?
A little bit. The whole, Go Science team. Because the other thing we're doing is we're monitoring what's going on. The big bits of misinformation out there. So we're really monitoring the space to get a sense of what kind of misinformation is getting traction. And because one of the things that evidence says, if you want to battle misinformation, you need to do is you need to get on it quickly, right? Who would have believed that the 5G conspiracy theory would take off? Who would have believed that the 28% of Americans would believe that Bill Gates started the pandemic in order to force vaccination to put microchips in us? That's a hardcore conspiracy theory. And who would have believed 28% of Americans would buy into it? And part of it is we didn't take it seriously enough right out of the gate, right? So I think it's research shows if we can counter this misinformation quickly with quality, shareable content that is easy to understand, then we can make a difference.
What would you say, before we let you go, I know a lot of people want to talk to you about this morning. What are some of the other key points where you're, where are these battlefields where you're confronting misinformation? There's vaccines. We take a look, today or right around today, this week anyway, marks 1 year since we saw the first case of COVID-19 in Canada. We've seen public health messaging here and there with regards to masks, with regards to social distancing. We've seen different policies with regards to public gatherings and travel and everything else. I mean, what are a couple of the key fronts that you're really focusing on right now?
Well, we're definitely focusing on vaccines broadly, all that misinformation. We've touched on some of those points, but you just raised something else. Masks, a lot of misinformation on masks, the idea that they do more harm than good. No, that's not the case at all. There's no evidence to support that at all. Also, on really, Ryan, a lot of myths around just the effectiveness of the lockdown, right? There is a body of evidence about, the effectiveness of those measures. Yes, it's complicated and messy research, but there is evidence to support it. So those are some of the things that we're also looking at. And believe it or not, you still got to debunk the idea that this is a pandemic. Some people still think it's a hoax. Still think it's no worse than the flu, despite these incredible numbers that we're seeing. Despite you can look out and see what's doing to your community. So we're going to try to tackle all of those really big issues, and starting, of course, with that misinformation around the vaccine.
So, do you think? I mean, there are some people here on our live chat on YouTube that are basically saying, yeah, but I mean, no matter how good this website is, or no matter how good Professor Caulfield is, there are going to be people that, just in essence are going to disagree, whether it's a counterculture idea, whether it's, because they have sort of bigger conspiracies about the state, whatever the case may be. There are some people you just won't reach. I don't know you to be a pessimist, but is that to a certain degree true?
That's a great question. If that was from one of your listeners, it's a really great question, and I'm glad it was raised, because we have to remember this is a tough battle. It's not the kind of thing that we're trying to move the dial, right? We're just trying to do our best to let it get worse. And the good news is, you're right. I'm not a pessimist. The good news is there is evidence to show that debunking works. We're not going to change the minds of those hardcore deniers, right? And I still believe we're looking in single digits with percentage-wise, if you're thinking of the whole population. We're trying to address that movable middle, those people who are trying to do the right thing, who are confused by all that misinformation out there. And Ryan, there is good evidence. There's good evidence that this works. Debunking does work. Battling misinformation does work, especially if you're nice, especially if you listen, and especially if you engage respectfully.
I love it. Professor Tim Caulfield, really appreciate this. Congratulations on ScienceUpFirst.com. Hashtag the exact same thing. People can link to it from my tweet earlier this morning. It's nice to see your face.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, you bet. That's Professor Tim Caulfield, University of Alberta, author of Relax, Damn It, A User's Guide to the Age of Anxiety. And obviously, I can see from the live chat, a lot of you are big fans of what he's doing. Again, ScienceUpFirst.com. I want to give a shout out to the team at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge today. 2021 is a huge year for the Jeep lineup, including not just that Gladiator. If you haven't, just Google Jeep Gladiator and you'll be like, amazing. They've got the 2021 Grand Cherokee coming out in a 7-passenger version for the first time ever, plus that Grand Wagoneer that's taking on all the big full-size luxury SUVs. You won't find a better selection than you will at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. Same deal with Clean Air Club. They want you to start fresh in 2021. If it's been a while since you changed your furnace filter, if maybe you're listening or watching right now, you didn't know you have to change your furnace filter, go right now to cleanairclub.ca. You give them the size of the filter you need. It's stamped right there on the filter, right there in your furnace. Next thing you know, they're dropped off at your door. You're going to save money. You're going to breathe easier thanks to the team at cleanairclub.ca. You know, one of the mandates of this show is to keep an eye on stories that aren't getting all of the attention, and that includes what's going on in Alberta agriculture right now. Dr. Ross McKenzie earned a bachelor's degree in ag at the University of Alberta, a master's degree at the University of Alberta in soil science, and a PhD in soil fertility plant nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan. He worked at Alberta Ag for 38 years, the last 32 of them as an agronomy research science, working on soil fertility and crop agronomy research. Dr. McKenzie, thanks so much for making time for us, and welcome to Real Talk this morning.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Ross, you've been sounding the alarm on social media about what's going on in Alberta agriculture right now, but there's so much going on in the news cycle that the mainstream media hasn't really picked up on this story at all. Can you bring us up to speed?
Well, sure. Just in terms of background information, about a year ago, they started to do unexpected cuts in Alberta agriculture. There was about, in December of 2019, about 52 people were cut very unexpectedly. And then in February of last year, we saw that in the budget, there was a plan to cut 277 staff from Alberta agriculture. And at that same time, there was all the extension staff at Stettler were cut, about 12 people. And then by spring, the plan was to cut another, like I said, 277 staff. That didn't happen because of the COVID outbreak that were delayed. But by October, over somewhere between 250 and 280 people got their notices, and they were all terminated in December. But that wasn't the end of it. Last week, there was another 19 people, mostly at Lacombe, some of them involved in the barley breeding program, that were terminated. So we would estimate somewhere between 325 and 350 people were cut from Alberta agriculture, so more than half the staff, plus a number of people, about 30 people, they weren't laid off, but they were just sort of traded off either to the University of Lethbridge, Olds College, or to the University of Alberta.
So let me ask you this very direct question. Why does this matter? Why should people be so concerned? I mean, it sounds to me like you say more than 50% of researchers and scientists laid off. There may be a deficiency in information. How does that play out? What are your worst fears right now?
Well, there's a real range of things that I'm concerned about. First, we've lost our extension capacity. What little extension capacity we had in the department to get new information out to farmers, that's been completely lost. The other thing is our research capacity is about 90% of the research capacity has been lost. So those research centers like at Lethbridge, Brooks, Lacombe, the Crop Diversification Center North, just north of Edmonton, up in the Peace River country, these researchers that were doing soil and crop and livestock research across the province, that just ended. And so where are our farmers going to go now for good research and unbiased information? And we have to look at our agriculture economy. It's second only to the oil and gas sector, but it's our most sustainable long-term industry. And we really want to be looking after our land and our farmers and making sure that they can, they are economic and they can produce good quality, nutritious food for not just for people in Western Canada, but around the world.
You know, I think it's fair to say, Doc, that the majority of us city slickers anyway, aside from maybe some general awareness around urban sprawl and development and maybe, you know, some of the issues around topsoil in the bedroom communities around the urban centers, we don't pay too much attention to soil. We don't pay too much attention to dirt, seed, inputs, things like that. We might be surprised to hear that Alberta farmers spend more than $1 billion in fertilizer each year. You know, we're aware of things like wind erosion, acid soils, high sodium soils. In layperson's language, in language that all of us can understand, can you help us put into perspective some of the biggest issues facing Alberta agriculture producers right now and how those might be made worse by these cuts to research?
Well, there's a number of areas we can have a look at. Maybe the first thing I'll just kind of mention is that by eliminating our research capacity, there's been a lot of very, very good coordinated research. For example, we have soil and water specialists, plant pathologists, entomologists, weed specialists. So all these people at the different research centers, they all work very collaboratively together to develop good agronomic information for farmers. And when we lose that capacity, where are farmers going to go for good solid information? But we need those teams of people working in the different soil and agrological areas to develop good information for farmers. And then those different centers can work collaboratively with each other to have good coordinated research across the province. So the recommendations we would develop for an irrigation farmer in southern Alberta versus a dryland farmer in central Alberta or a farmer in the Peace River country, those recommendations are going to be very different to grow the same crops. And so we have to really work hard together to do that. But you made a comment about soils. Well, we have to look at soil as probably one of our most important long-term sustainable resources that we have in Alberta. In Alberta, we have about 360 million acres of land, but of that land, only about a third of it is actually used for agriculture. So about 27 million acres is only used for livestock grazing and forage production. But that's the capability of that land.
Ross, if you had a question, if you were able to ask the agriculture minister a question face to face right now, what would be the first question you'd ask Minister Dreeshen?
I guess the first thing I'd say is, what the hell are you thinking? What the hell are you doing? He really seems to have no knowledge of what's the importance of research and extension and getting information out to farmers. And he from his perspective, he thought Alberta agriculture staff were mostly just doing research for the sake of research, and nothing could be further from the truth. Alberta agriculture researchers were doing very applied research that were very directly benefit Alberta farmers. So they were an excellent source of information. They've all been terminated, and now he's put money into a new research organization up to about 37 million a year. Only 20 or maybe 17 million might be available for researchers, but the research capacity is lost. So I'm not sure he's going to give that money to actually get research done.
Dr. Ross McKenzie, almost 40 years with Alberta Agriculture in crop agronomy research, soil fertility. Thanks for making time for us. We appreciate you sounding the alarm on this.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Dr. McKenzie pointing this out to us. I want you to know that we're also working right now on putting together an agriculture roundtable. It looks to me like this is going to be probably early next week, maybe a week from today, maybe next Tuesday. Really looking for, to put some A-listers on that panel, including Sean Haney, SiriusXM host and founder of Real Agriculture. Looking forward to that conversation with him. The team at Kubi Energy, a little later today, is presenting Positive Reflections. We want to make sure that you leave some time set aside on your Monday morning to ensure you step out on the right foot. That's coming up. The team at Local Waste, in the meantime, of course, looking ahead to Friday, Trash Talk is where we're going to get into the gripes that you provide to us. Both of these submitted to talk@ryanjesperson.com. That's the best way to get in touch with us. Local Waste has been in the waste management game for more than 25 years as a family business. And they want your business, whether it's a small restaurant, a retail boutique, or whether you're running a shopping mall. They can find a custom-fit solution for you. Give Chris or Lauren a call at 780-242-9746 or localwaste.ca. They would love to talk trash with you. Let's take a look at what's making news right now before we sit down with Rachel Notley. Well, as mentioned, Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the United States, says there's no chance that American President Joe Biden is walking back his decision to kill the Keystone XL pipeline, so she's turning her attention to other pressing bilateral issues. Telling CBC's The House on Saturday, quote, "It's obviously very disappointing for Albertans and people in Saskatchewan who are already in a difficult situation, but I think we need to focus on moving forward with this administration. There are so many ways in which we're going to be aligned with them to our mutual interest that I'm eager to get going on that." Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney lashing out this past week at both President Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, accusing the federal government of abandoning the oil and gas sector. Meantime, in Alberta politics, everybody paying keen attention to fundraising, making their own assumptions or taking their own observations away from what that may mean. Alberta's NDP breaking a party record, collecting more cash than the governing United Conservatives last year. This according to numbers filed with Elections Alberta. The New Democrats, the United Conservatives, each raising just over $5 million in 2020. The NDP ahead by about $16,000. And stateside, she was formerly the voice of the President of the United States and of the Trump administration, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, will seek the governor's office in Arkansas in 2022. This confirmed by CBS News this morning. Ms. Huckabee Sanders announcing her campaign in a video posted to her Twitter account earlier this morning. She highlighted her tenure serving as White House press secretary under former President Trump, calling for an end to violence and a return to peaceful protest. Of course, her dad, Mike Huckabee, was the governor of Arkansas for a number of years back in the 1990s and early 2000s. We're keeping an eye on the Real Talk RJ hashtag, of course, on our live YouTube comments, as well as we welcome to the program the leader of Alberta's official opposition, formerly the Premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley, joining us this morning. Thanks for making time for us, and a good Monday to you.
Good morning to you. Looking forward to this conversation. I will say my internet and my internet skills, moderate. So we'll see how this goes.
Well, I think so far so good. The framing looks good. The lighting looks good. What's that painting behind you? Is that Edmonton skyline? I can kind of barely see it.
Which one? The green?
Yeah, the green.
No. It's kind of a modernist thing
that
I got at an auction, but I don't think I have Edmonton here. I've got some local stuff in the other room, but I could walk you through my house and show you paintings. But
why don't we tackle? We'll get into like 15 issues. We'll solve Keystone XL, and then we could do the art tour. Let's get right to it. The Premier over the weekend on Fox News. He's was on Power and Politics. He's with Mercedes Stephenson on Global. He's doing every interview that he can to get his message in front of people that Canada deserves more respect from the Biden administration. Keystone was a big part of obviously what was in front of you, and you were Premier of Alberta, now as official opposition leader. What do you make of all this? Canada's ambassador to the U.S. says it's time to move on. Do you share the perspective, or is there still maybe an opportunity to save this pipeline?
Well, I doubt very much that there is really an opportunity to save this pipeline, but and it is unfortunate. I mean, let me begin by saying, I know there is at least 1,000 people who have lost their jobs, a portion of them on this side of the border, and there was another 1,800 or so folks at least in Canada that were hoping to get some really good paying work on this pipeline over the next few years. And so obviously there is profound disappointment. What is frustrating to me, though, Ryan, is that, this Premier is completely exaggerating things, misrepresenting things. He's not helping Alberta's case on multiple different fronts. And he's also doing all this desperately to hide the fact that he's essentially rolled the dice with at least $1.5 billion that belongs to Albertans, with another potential up to $6 billion. And we don't know because they continue to hide the amount of money that we're on the hook for this thing. And he did it incredibly irresponsibly. And so he's just throwing everything at the wall to try to distract from that fundamental piece. And I listened to one of the interviews that, you were talking about there, Ryan, and I swear to God, the man is pathological in terms of how much stuff he says that is not true, and it's really important that some of these things that he's saying are actually fact checked, because we just cannot go down the path in this province of allowing this Premier to stoke anger on the basis of things that aren't accurate.
Okay, well, so we were talking about misinformation on a different front with Professor Caulfield. Let's talk about misinformation with you. What do Albertans need to recognize as simply untrue?
Well, I think, to begin with, Jason Kenney is suggesting that no one could have known what was going to happen with Biden because he didn't, in March, he wasn't the candidate yet, and he didn't declare his position on Keystone until the summer of 2019. First of all, that, Joe Biden won Super Tuesday on March 3rd. Jason Kenney rolled the dice on Keystone at the end of March. And it was very clear what Joe Biden's position was. He was part of the administration that canceled the pipeline the first time. And he was known to have been quite connected in that decision. And he had clearly laid out a campaign strategy for this campaign that was very much focused around combating climate change. So, and indeed, TC themselves said the reason they were pulling out, or were talking about pulling out, was because they could tell what was coming with Joe Biden. So Jason Kenney very clearly understood what was coming when he rolled the dice. Secondly, he's suggesting, that somehow the prime minister is at fault for not doing trade sanctions. Do you know who else didn't do trade sanctions when Keystone was put in jeopardy? Stephen Harper. In 2015, about 7 months before the final vetoing of Keystone by Obama, Obama vetoed a Senate bill compelling the construction of Keystone. And when that happened, Stephen Harper said nothing. And he did not bring in sanctions. He didn't do anything. And you know who was in the cabinet then? Jason Kenney. He's suggesting that the $1.5 to $7 billion investment in Keystone is exactly like what we did with crude by rail. Absolutely untrue. When we invested $3.7 billion in crude by rail, we did it because we absolutely knew we were going to get 4,400 rail cars. And we weren't hoping we would get 4,400 rail cars. That was in the contract. We only paid if we got 4,400 rail cars. And in doing that, we were projecting to get about $6 billion in revenue. And so we had a lot of room. We could actually lose 50% of our revenue and still break even. Instead, Albertans are actually paying $2.1 billion in penalties for Jason Kenney breaking that contract with no rail cars. So it's not at all alike because, in fact, it wasn't a gamble. And what Jason Kenney did was a gamble. They are similar in that in both cases, Albertans are losing billions of dollars because of decisions taken by Jason Kenney. I'm going to try not to go on for too long, but he consistently is conflating Keystone with the energy industry as a whole. So he keeps talking about how it's worth $100 billion. Absolutely. Canada's energy industry is worth that. And Ottawa needs to always be focused on how to protect the industry and maintain its sustainability because our economy is inextricably linked to it. But Keystone is not worth $100 billion. And to suggest that it is ridiculous. The current industry is worth $100 billion. And our takeaway capacity can be addressed through TMX and Line 3. Keystone is an insurance investment, an important one for sure. But to suggest that we're going to lose a $100 billion industry because of Keystone it's hysterical. And it undermines the strength of the position that he has taken to other settings. He talks about jobs, and it is true. We talked about the 2,800 direct jobs that are lost in Alberta or in Canada because of the cancellation of Keystone. He talks about 60,000 jobs. Those are indirect jobs, 3/4 of which are south of the border. So I'm not in any way negating or trying to undermine the importance of those jobs to the people who won't get them now. It's critically important. But let us not forget, this is a premier who, with the stroke of a pen, fired 20,000 educational assistants in the middle of a pandemic and is currently planning to fire a further 11,000 frontline healthcare workers. Those are direct jobs, not indirect jobs. Let's not even talk about the indirect jobs that are compromised because of those decisions. So it is a little rich for this premier to claim that he's concerned about jobs because he clearly is not. We've seen, we gave away $4.7 billion in corporate handouts. A number of those went to very large, profitable energy companies. Within the energy sector, just in terms of 4 companies, an example, Husky claimed $250 million. They booked $250 million as a result of Jason Kenney's corporate tax cut. They then turned around, invested in Newfoundland, Saskatchewan, and Wisconsin. And now they are merging with Cenovus, and we anticipate, and they've been very clear, they anticipate firing roughly 2,000 people. Where was Jason Kenney's cry then? So again, all these jobs matter. Keystone jobs matter, but we must put this in context. What this is really about is Jason Kenney frantically, hysterically, desperately trying to turn the channel on yet another failed decision and failed demonstration of poor judgment in his leadership. I mean, he's a great campaigner, but he is not very good at running the show.
When you, and you probably still have numbers in front of you, but with regards to people like civilians like me and people tuned in right now, trying to get a sense of the value of Keystone, actually what the forecast was, I've seen it estimated that it would have been worth about $30 billion over the next 20 years to the province of Alberta. Is that approximately the numbers that you saw in front of you?
50 years, over 50 years.
30 billion over 50 years, so it's like 700 million a year, something like that ish, approximately.
Something like that. Yeah, and that's to the economy, I think.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you know,
so it's important.
Well, it's important, but yeah, I mean, people just people like me that are just sort of going about our everyday business want to know what the numbers look like, and there's a lot of numbers being thrown around, so we want to know what's accurate. There's court challenges in Michigan as well. You talk about Line 3 and Line 5, and it can be easy. People's heads kind of start swirling or their eyes glaze over when we talk pipelines. Northern Gateway dead, Energy East dead, Keystone XL dead. We've got TMX under construction, so the expansion there, and then there was the idea of oil by rail as sort of a backup policy with regards to getting Alberta energy product to market. If court challenges succeeded, if Line 3 and Line 5 were successfully in those crosshairs and killed, then what type of a situation does Alberta find itself in right now? Because if you were a big proponent of pipelines these days, nobody would blame you for being a little bit nervous.
Absolutely. Line 3 and Line 5 are critically important lines. No question about that. But again, I would argue that, and I've spoken to experts in the industry over the course of the last few days, because when I first heard Jason Kenney's argument in that front, my response was, oh, okay, well, is there a real concern that we should have with these pipelines? Because that is a whole different story. And so I've consulted with experts, and they've all said, no, they are not at risk in a meaningful way. Biden has been very clear not to speak about them during his campaign. And the reason is because, one is practically built as opposed to Keystone, where there was 2 or 3 pump stations and a couple of kilometers of pipeline in the ground. Line 3 is practically built, and they need it. Like it's that pipeline is as important to many players in the U.S. And more as much as to us. And with Line 5, there's also quite a symbiotic economic relationship. So what I'm told is that both of those would implicate a huge number of jobs currently in the U.S. And so it is exceptionally unlikely that either of those would ever be seriously considered as a target. And if you look at some of the decisions that have been made with respect to them and the comments of the Public Safety Commissioner about them, it does appear as though they are considered very, very differently. Nonetheless, what this is Jason Kenney doing what he does, which is exaggerating and conflating, and that's where we're at. But
I
don't think they're at risk.
This is to a certain degree, this is going to be apples and oranges. Your wine ban that sort of brought some attention to some interprovincial trade issues, and I think more than anything, it was an effective communications tool. It was kind of cheeky. It reminded British Columbians that we have somewhat of a symbiotic economic relationship. Then you've got things like sanctions, like international tariffs, and a bit of a bigger deal. Just ask people in lumber or aluminum or whatever the case may be. I've seen it suggested suggested that it would have been appropriate for Alberta's premier to call for sanctions against the United States had the Biden administration, for example, slapped a tariff on Canadian crude, not simply denied a pipeline project. Acknowledging that this is apples and oranges to a certain degree, what went into the thinking behind the wine ban? What would it take for you to ask, as a premier of a province, to ask the prime minister to consider sanctions, most especially on day one of a new administration? What would go through? What would be your thought process? I wonder if maybe we've lost.
Well, I mean,
there we go.
Again, as I say, I mean, I guess.
I think we might be losing Rachel Notley's connection here.
One of the most.
Rachel, we're
did you lose me?
No, it's okay. I mean, it was really good, and then it started getting kind of lousy. But let's try again. Let's see. Why don't we try? Sam, you can go behind the scenes and see if you can try to fix it. Okay, we'll see.
Yeah, no, same thing. Sorry, the same thing is happening to me too. I can only hear bits and pieces of you, so I'll try. Sorry.
Tell Lou to get off the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of have to do that. I think that might actually be what's going on right now, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But anyway, just a second. Yeah. Anyway, I can't do this. Anyway, right now. Anywho, the fact of the matter is that Alberta and all of Canada is struggling to come back from what is one of the most damaging economic situations we've been in decades and decades and decades. So throwing beginning a trade war across the board with the U.S. when all sectors of our economy need economic acceleration and access to economic growth is it's like cutting off the top half of your body to spite your nose. I mean, it makes no sense. There's no proportionality involved in this. And Jason Kenney quite frankly should know better. With respect to, and it's certainly not analogous at all to the situation he refers to in the past with the steel tariffs. And let me just say as well, just before I get into the wine ban, when he claims that we have a case for damages, that's another complete dissembling. He's just, again, trying to distract. There's not a lawyer out there who thinks we have the slightest opportunity to engage in or to get money back through a lawsuit. But with the wine ban, that goes back to the difference in these decisions. And the difference in the decision is that you invest where you have agency and a clear relationship. So that's why we push so hard for TMX, because obviously the federal government has complete agency, and even as an adjacent partner, we have multiple relationships that need to work well, and you can pull on those strings, whether it's the wine ban or whether it was Bill 12 and threatening to cut off our oil. All of those things gave us capacity to engage with the people of BC and the decision makers there, as well as with the federal government. And that's where a government invests money, not where they have no control. And I don't know if you can hear a thing that I'm saying right now. Are you still there?
We can hear it all.
Oh, you are.
We're still here.
Excellent.
You're doing great. You're back with us. People are quoting Us Magazine. You know that feature they have where they show like Justin Timberlake pushing a grocery cart, and they're saying she's just like us. She has problems with her Wi-Fi. So I mean, Jason Kenney, I've seen him, the premier, say this several times. Asked by Kelly Kreiderman, journalist, over the phone. I saw Vashi Kapelos ask him this on Power and Politics, and he bristled. Basically, do you regret the $1.5 billion bet? Do you regret the loan guarantees? And he bristles, and he basically says any responsible Alberta government would have invested that $1.5 billion. The project would have been dead without it.
No, he didn't have to do that, quite honestly. Like, don't get me wrong. As we've talked about before, after President Trump, revived the project through the permit, TC Energy came to us and asked us to commit barrels of oil to it. And they did it because even then they were struggling to get investors. And quite honestly, they've been struggling to get investors all along. The reason being that there's been profound profound levels of uncertainty with this project, even after Trump revived it. And so we did commit a certain, 500,000 barrels of oil. But to be clear, that commitment was incumbent on it getting built. We didn't put money in the front end, and we don't put money in the front end when you have no control over the decision-making mechanisms, which of course Alberta does not. Jason Kenney may have delusions of grandeur, but to be clear, he is the Premier of Alberta, and he is not going to have a significant impact on the decision-making at the White House. What he is going to do is have a significant impact on the bottom line of Alberta's fiscal health by risking $7 billion on a project over which he had no control, that all experts told us were at risk. So had we been in government, what would we have done? We would not have invested up front like that. And it's not, to be honest, there have been numerous times when we were in government when we would get those kind of proposals coming at us from different businesses. And we would always say, no, we are not playing that game. We will give you some economic security. We will give you what you need to get better financing. We are not going to risk like this. And so, had we been in that position, we would have probably looked at ways in which we could have kept the project alive pending the outcome of the presidential race, but not move forward at the rate at which they claim they needed to. And to be clear, we also know that it takes a long time to get things moving on the ground with a pipeline. So even after they put all that money into it, what do we have on the south side of the border? About 3 pump stations and 2 kilometers of pipe. Like, it doesn't move fast. And so we did not need to spend $1.5 billion on 3 pump stations and 2.5 kilometers of pipe. Anyway, it is not something a reasonable premier would have done. Certainly not someone who claims to be careful and prudent with taxpayers' dollars. It was one of the most imprudent, reckless decisions I have seen by a premier in a very long time.
You were premier when the oil global energy prices tanked. You were looking at a deficit that was much larger than your finance minister, Joe Ceci, had put in front of Albertans. The impetus was there to explore alternative sources of revenue. How seriously did you consider at any point rescinding the coal policy and digging into the eastern slopes?
We never considered that. That was never something that we were considering as an economic policy, ever, 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 for all the reasons that are being articulated so effectively by tens of thousands of Albertans from all corners of the province, but particularly in southern Alberta, outlining how important the integrity of the water system, the integrity of those mountains are to multiple other economic activities in the area, as well as just basically access to water generally. And so it was just never anything. It was never on our radar. As you know, we were very proud to actually move forward on eliminating coal as an energy producing mechanism. And, I was talking with friends just the other day about how just even in Edmonton alone, our air quality has improved considerably. And because we've accelerated the shutdown of coal. And that has, as a result, had a massive impact on our emissions in Alberta. And so, that was our approach there.
Okay, so Sam, can you show? Sam and I are really excited. We have new technology available this morning that we can show you what's on my screen here, and I want to show everybody coal hard facts that was pushed out by the United Conservatives just over the last couple of days. They say, hey, look at this. It's a myth that protected lands are open to development. It's a myth that there's an end to restrictions on Category 2 parkland. It's a myth that coal mines will forever change our mountain landscapes. You, I would imagine, have a bit more insight into this than the average person might, considering it's political policy we're talking about. Do you have confidence that the Alberta Energy Regulator and that other environmental monitoring bodies can be trusted by Albertans when it comes to our land, air, water, and wildlife?
Well, I will say that I had growing confidence when we were in government because we cared very much about these issues. Certainly, I don't have that confidence anymore. We have probably the worst environment minister that this province has seen ever. and who is committed, it seems, at every corner to undermine the environment and undermine our air, land, and water at every opportunity. So I don't have confidence. The UCP, as we know, is very confident in going out there with things that are not accurate. It is very clear that the coal policy's protection of Category 2 lands has been removed by removal of the coal policy, and the so-called change that they made last week impacted 1% of the relevant lands, and what we know is that open pit mining can be incredibly damaging to the areas around it, and we know also that the degree to which we get reclamation done appropriately is, we're not talking 100%, we're talking 50%. I don't know, and so the AER, for heaven's sakes, the AER in its current form. To be clear, remember the AER depends on science to do its job well, and they have lost hundreds and hundreds of employees over the last 18 months. They're constantly firing people because the UCP perceives them as red tape. And what we saw just a couple weeks ago, for instance, was a case where the AER identified an oil company that refused to engage in appropriate reclamation, filed fraudulent documentation, lied about what they did. It was clear that they actually engaged in criminal behavior in terms of not doing their reclamation, and the AER didn't find them one single solitary cent. So I'm sorry, but their credibility at this point is significantly undermined under the leadership of Jason Nixon and Jason Kenney.
Ms. Notley, you have to go. I have to go. So let me just ask you this in closing. We can dig into it more in future conversations. I think a lot of Albertans right now that are aware of the need for the province to glean revenue wherever possible are raising their eyebrows around the rumored sale of profitable Alberta registries, land titles offices, etc. What's going on here?
Well, I mean, honestly, this is not a new idea, and I gotta just wonder exactly which UCP donor is pushing this idiotic agenda as hard as they are, because this is an effort that earns money for the government of Alberta and currently provides that service at relatively low cost compared to other jurisdictions. So if you privatize it, you will see the prices go up. Alberta will lose that regular stream of revenue, and Alberta businesses and business owners and entrepreneurs and all the other people who access these services will end up paying higher costs and undoubtedly have a less effective and certainly less accountable services. So it is mind-boggling that they're thinking about it, and it smacks of something that's being driven by insider best interests.
We always invite our guests to showcase their dogs here on Real Talk. I don't know if your dog's in the room with you. We can
just a second.
But if it's convenient. Yeah, the audience is big on meeting the dogs.
Here's what I'm going to do if I don't lose you.
Okay.
I think Johnny's outside. Let me just check here. Is he in? Where is he?
In there.
In here? Okay. We're going to see if we can just find him here. Hold on.
Yeah. Fatima's watching. She's a little surprised there's not more orange decor in your home. She says there's more blue. There's more blue than she expected.
I'm not quite sure where Johnny is, but poor Tucker is really quite under featured these days. So
Tucker.
There he is, just keeping an eye on what's going on outside.
Is that an Australian Shepherd? What is Tucker?
I think he's a German Shepherd. I'm just showing Ryan and his viewers Tucker. Yeah. So
You're on the air right now.
I'm on the air right now.
We are live as we speak. Yes.
Yeah. Ryan is just saying, that you should probably not use the internet when I'm.
Yeah, Lou, stay off the Wi-Fi when Rachel's doing interviews, will you?
Anyway, so
hey, well, listen, thank you so much for this. We appreciate your availability, and I don't think it's too late to wish you and your home a happy New Year. Thanks for this.
Yeah, and you too. Take care.
You got it. That's Rachel Notley, leader of Alberta's official opposition, the NDP. We're going to be talking to Amarjeet Sohi in just a minute. Amarjeet worked the Keystone XL file for a couple of years, Minister of Infrastructure, Minister of Natural Resources. We'll get into that in just a second. Wanted to remind you that the team at Dairy Queen is ready for you this week, Real Talkers, at the 6 locations in Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. I dug into a dilly bar over the weekend. I'm not going to lie. This is real life. I had forgotten because, Sam, I was so obsessed. I've been telling you with other elements of the Dairy Queen lineup, including the Blizzard, that I had sort of foregone the dilly bar. But our little guy, Wyatt, heard me talking about it, so we got a box. We picked up a box 2 for 1, by the way, if you're a real talker. And I forgot the substance of the dilly bar. It's a small enough treat, but the substance, you can really sink your teeth into it. It's a beautiful thing, the Dairy Queen Dilly Bar.
It's a dip cone on a stick.
It's a dip cone on a stick. And right now, boxes of 6 are 2 for 1. As long as you bring them up to the counter at the 6 locations in Northwest Edmonton, Sherwood Park, and say, Real Talk sent me. Friesen Brothers, I don't know about 2 for 1 deals, but I can tell you this, Friesen Brothers is so excited. I was just talking to them over the weekend to be opening their 15th Alberta location right here in Edmonton coming up soon. Like, we're talking soon. We're going to give you the exact date.
It's near my parents' house, so I'm very jealous.
Are your parents excited about it? Have they been talking about it? The whole grocery game is going to change in South Edmonton. I'm telling you, people are going to drive from the north side to go check out this store. You're going to say, Jesperson, I better not drive all the way across town to find out it's just like every other store. Would I be looking into the lens and telling you? Trust me, unbelievable. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown, Alberta owned. They've been supporting Alberta farmers, producers for more than 60 years. And again, soon to open here in Edmonton. Is Amarjeet ready to go? Let's roll in hot into this.
He's just connecting right now.
Okay, perfect.
So.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll read a couple of the comments here. We've got a whole bunch of people chiming in. Penny says... Penny says she has to remove the dilly bar from the stick. Can't deal with the feeling of the wooden stick on the teeth. See, Penny, I'm the other way around. I scrape the stick. I got to get all the chocolate you can, right? James says...
I'm like that, too.
James says, get the pie! James was at Friesen Brothers. James, I think this must be crazy, James, because he tweeted at me a few days ago, and he said that... Where was he again? Which location? Not Fort Saskatchewan. James, I apologize. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he got one of the Friesen Brothers fresh-baked pies, and he was losing. He had to tweet and tell me about it. He was absolutely losing his mind. Shalane says, now try to imagine what the Kenny house would be like during a live interview. That would be great. I'd love to have Jason Kenny on from his house. He could chime in with us and show us around, show us the art on the walls. Why not? You learn a lot about somebody, don't you, by seeing their dogs and seeing the art they have on their walls. You know, we've got a couple buddies that still have posters up in their place. You know, you learn a lot from people based on what they have up on their walls.
I think so. It's like, that's kind of a weird, like, if I can call it a small joy of the pandemic.
Yes.
In that, like, we're getting these little windows into everybody's sort of environment now, right? And I mean, the other thing is, it's, you know, now you make your home workspace look good on a Zoom call.
I did that
Yeah.
the CBC West of Center podcast.
Oh, yeah?
Last week with Kathleen Petty and Dave Cornway was on there, Dave Berta, and he had a very good looking, very impressive workspace within
I sat in on that.
Yeah, you
recording.
saw
I remember
that. So
seeing that,
you know,
yeah.
people can find that, and he had the point of view of the camera. Look, Dave had all the his accreditations and frames on the wall, and behind him wonderful pieces of art, and he just looked very sort of chic, you know, workplace, like home workplace chic. And then he confessed, upon being complimented about his workspace, he confessed that the rest of it was a toddler's disaster, like any other toddler toy room, but it was off camera, so nobody had any idea. Okay.
I was going to say, at my desk at home, I have a whiteboard right behind me. So, like, on the one hand, I can write messages if people are on a Zoom call with me, but it's also kind of boring.
It lacks a certain aesthetic.
I know, yeah. I need to, like, I'm seriously considering moving the whiteboard in my office just so it looks better on Zoom calls.
You know what we should do is rank like the top 5 Real Talk guest what would you call it? Like sort of home studios or whatever you want to call them. I remember when Ann Castleman was on, and she was talking about National Universal Childcare, and she had this, people were calling it like a craft wall behind her. She had like gaff tape, scissors, electrical tape,
Jeremy
all on
Klasius also had a craft wall behind him too, and that vintage
Klasius
radio.
had the vintage radio
Oh,
that
yeah.
everybody liked. See, it does make an
Well,
impression.
and then Tim Caulfield, who we had this morning, always has the
Yay
Go Science pennant.
The Yay Science pennant. I like it. Let's talk pipelines. Amarjeet Sohi, former member of Parliament, out of this is the orange everybody expected from Rachel Notley, but Amarjeet Sohi rocking the orange this morning. I would expect a red turtleneck from you. We're just full of surprises. A good Monday to you, my friend.
Well, good morning, Ryan, and good morning, Sam, and good morning to your listeners.
It's wonderful to have you here. We're, hitting this pipeline issue. I'm going to ask you about the resignation of Julie Payette, Governor General, coming up in a few minutes. But everybody's talking about Keystone. Obviously, you were, around the table in senior cabinet. I mean, this was your portfolio. Minister of Infrastructure, Minister of Natural Resources. Were you surprised at all by the announcement day one of the Biden presidency, the pipeline's killed?
I would say I was not surprised. Obviously, I was disappointed because I worked on this project in my capacity as a Minister of Natural Resources. Then before that, as Alberta's minister in Trudeau cabinet, and the importance of this project. Just hold on, what's someone?
We're good. You're good.
Yeah, we
can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. We can see you. Yeah, you're all good.
Okay. So I was disappointed because this Enbridge pipeline project is a good project. It obviously creates a lot of jobs that are much needed, not only in Alberta, Saskatchewan, but also in the United States in light of the pandemic and the recession and the job losses that we have experienced, as well as for the North American energy security, that integration that continues to be a very strong relationship with the U.S. So I think it always made sense to have this project go through. But I think we knew about the uncertainty. We knew that when President Obama canceled this project in 2015, Joe Biden was his vice president at that time. So he knew. And there's pressures within the Democrats and environmental organizations. So, disappointed, but not surprised.
So what's Alberta's premier is indicating his displeasure with the Biden administration directly, but is also calling on the prime minister, on Justin Trudeau, to do something, including considering economic sanctions against the United States. What do you think the prime minister has considered at this point? What do you think he would consider? We've been talking this morning about how Canada's ambassador to the U.S. says it's a lost cause. She's forgetting about it. How do you assess the future of this?
I think Prime Minister absolutely tested the waters when he raised this issue again with President Biden on his first meeting on Friday. And the indications are very clear that there's no room for negotiations on this project, that this was a campaign commitment made by Biden, a campaign commitment made by his predecessor, Democrat predecessor, Barack Obama. Even President Trump reinstating the presidential permit to build Keystone XL within his presidency of 4 years, not a single kilometer of pipeline has been laid on Keystone XL in the U.S. So I think these are the indications that this project is not going to be revived. As far as sanctions are concerned, Ryan, U.S. is our only customer to whom we sell our oil and gas. And do you really want to impact that relationship and the implications it would have for Alberta's economy and for Saskatchewan's economy? We also have outstanding issues on other pipelines. I heard your interview with Opposition Leader and former Premier Rachel Notley, and she touched on some of those dynamics. But I can tell you that Enbridge Line 5 and Enbridge Line 3. We need to resolve issues on those two pipelines. And there are real issues on those two pipelines. So do we want to pick fights with Biden administration on a pipeline that's not going to go anywhere? Or do we look for opportunities to work with the new administration to resolve issues on the other pipelines and also have a uniform environmental standards in place on pricing pollution and having better uniform standards on fuel standards? And I think all those things do create opportunities for Canadian oil and gas sector to have the level playing field. Right, so that's where our energy should be focused.
I was wincing a little bit, I'll be honest, last week when Premier was I mean, I don't want to say having a temper tantrum, but he was becoming increasingly agitated as he was talking about President Biden's decision, and he started to point out the legal challenges, and he started to point out some of the challenges, the very real ones, the issues that you suggest face those two pipelines, lines 3 and 5, and I was wincing a little bit because what he was essentially doing is drawing attention to these. And for many Americans, it may have been the very first time that they were hearing that there were challenges against these pipelines, let alone court action. What are some of the issues as you identify them based on your experience as infrastructure minister, as a senior cabinet minister? And what do you think Canada's position on those issues should be?
Well, let's look at Enbridge Line 5. This pipeline was built in 1953. And it has some safety issues, and some portions needs to be replaced under the Great Lakes, under the water. And there are some concerns, some serious concerns from Michigan and surrounding communities about the safety of this pipeline. So I, have spoken with, when I was a Minister of Natural Resources, spoken with the Governor Whitmer regarding her concerns and the concerns from her Attorney General. And at that time, through our diplomatic relations and through the embassy and the ambassador in Michigan, we were able to resolve those issues. Now, Michigan governor is actually challenging in courts to cancel the easement on Line 5. So that's a serious concern. And Canada would have to work with the new Biden administration. And don't forget that Governor Whitmer was a very senior player in electing Biden to his presidency. So we need to manage those relations and make sure that further action is not taken and that we resolve this legal challenge through our diplomatic relations with the United States. On line 3, it is still going through some legal challenges, and there's opposition from local communities and there's opposition from indigenous communities in the United States. It's a project that's ready to go and almost, I would say, entirely completed in Canada, but much work has not been done in the United States. So you can't really complete this project unless that work is completed. So there's work to be done on that. I think these are the two pipelines that allow us to continue to supply our oil and gas to our only customer. And further to that, we have a price inflation in Canada. U.S. does not. So how do we work with the U.S. to make sure that they're putting a price on pollution? That how we work together on having uniform standards around what kind of fuels that we use and the intensity of emissions in those fuels. I think there's a lot of opportunities that exist for us to continue to work. But I think where I take issue with the Premier Kenney, understanding his frustration, and I share some of that frustration, is that his tactics are more harmful to the oil and gas sector that will burden us interests than they will help.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's hurting, he's harming more than he's helping, which I think probably would be reason for some people to get kind of nervous. As he's
I'm nervous, and I think one thing, Ryan, that I've been reflecting on it for a little since the decision, or even before the decision, knowing that this was coming. Like, what message are we trying to convey to the world? We talk about Alberta's oil sector being the cleanest. Yes, I get it that emissions intensity has decreased almost to 30% in the per barrel intensity, that we have taken actions on some environmental concerns. So we wanted to tell those issues. We wanted to tell our story to the world that we take climate change and environmental protection seriously. But have we done it? We have not. I was hoping that that we will be able to mount a good campaign to tell that story. But on the opposite to that, we have been bungling on our storytelling. We have the worst communication strategy in place when we call out opponents as enemies, when we call out one of the major players in the Biden administration that we would have to work with, brain dead, when we have a war room that instead of having a fact-based, evidence-based strategy actually relies on shoddy science and denies climate change. I think that mixed message has really hurt our communications and has not really been able for us to convey that consistent message that we needed to tell the world why they should be buying Alberta oil.
Yeah. I mean, for just in case your comment flew under the radar, and I think that people, need to be reminded sometimes that a short time ago, Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney suggested that Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer was brain dead because last summer her state waged a legal fight against Enbridge's Line 5. Said Alberta's Premier on a conservative-friendly podcast, quote, "How brain dead do you have to be to try to shut off your largest source of energy?" Talking about Michigan's governor. To give you a sense of the diplomacy here at play.
Well, this is what it is. Like I served in cabinet for 4 years. I can tell you that with your strongest partner, diplomacy works better than your open threat. Sometimes, yes, you have to deploy sanctions, but sanctions are only effective when there's a room for negotiation and there's room for give and take. And I think those tools, in this case, in the case of Keystone XL, actually will hurt us more than they will hurt the U.S.
What do you think? I mean, there's going to be a dramatic, there already has been a turnaround with regards to America's environmental policy, America's perspective on energy future. Joe Biden on day one rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, or at least signing into order. It'll take about a month for everything to happen. It's going to be it is a different landscape than it was under President Donald Trump. How do you think that the federal government and how do you think Alberta's provincial government is going to have to be able to adapt to this new reality in negotiating with and trading with our most important partner?
Ryan, aside from Biden's decision on Keystone XL, I am actually very excited to see President Biden in power, because it creates so many opportunities for us to align our priorities on climate change, align our priorities on international relations, align our priorities on coming out of this pandemic together stronger with a jobs plan and an economic growth plan where both countries can be complementary to each other. I'm really excited that work that can be done on the race relations, on reducing the division and polarization that exists in the U.S. and that spills into Canada, and his his cancellation of some of the policies that Trump administration brought in attacking ethnic minorities and Trump's rhetoric on immigration and all those things. So I think all those things create opportunities for Canada and the U.S. to continue to strengthen that relationship and find common ground and work together on.
I'm just reading this right now for the first time. This is a breaking news this morning, so I'll ask you to respond. Perhaps you're hearing it for the first time as well. But Lynn Bayek has just announced her retirement from the Senate. Your thoughts on that? Your response?
I was very disappointed with Senator Bayek's attack on Indigenous communities, and not really understanding the pain and the and the suffering that residential schools has caused Indigenous kids and Indigenous families and communities, and belittling and calling those experiences as positive experiences, and her insistence of not walking back from those words and still continue to promote that. So I'm glad that she's stepping down. We have no room in our public institutions or anywhere in our country for blatant racism or systemic racism or any form of division and racism and homophobia or anything that divides us. So I'm glad, and I hope that this is a lesson learned by others, that we need to be mindful what we say, and we need to be very careful that our words have meanings. And when words have meanings, particularly words coming from people in authority, they can damage, and they can be very, very damaging. And in her case, she did a lot of damage and really opened up wounds for that pain and suffering that Indigenous communities had experienced.
There's been a lot of talk about the Governor General's role with the resignation. I'm not sure if it's somewhat sudden, certainly, but maybe not surprising considering this leadership review, the investigation into allegations of harassment and a toxic workplace culture. The Prime Minister is being criticized for appointing Julie Payette in the first place, considering some of the history that should have been or potentially was considered here. Is this a stain on Justin Trudeau? What's your interpretation of Ms. Payette's resignation from this office?
Ryan, I have worked in workplaces where bullying and demeaning, belittling was pretty commonplace, and I have faced the brunt of it. So any person engaged in such a behavior absolutely does not deserve to be in a position of authority. So I'm glad that Payette has stepped down. As far as the process of appointments is concerned, I don't know the real story behind the appointment, but there was a rigorous process of selection and vetting in place. In this case, absolutely, it did not work. So you need to look at how to improve that process. I at a personal level, I spent few hours with our former Governor General Payette on a bus trip in Northwest Territories. Very nice person on the surface, but what we hear in the report is absolutely deplorable, and such behavior is absolutely unacceptable. And I hope that the next selection will definitely be a better choice.
Do you have confidence in the process as is? The Prime Minister essentially making the selection. I mean, some people, I saw conservative writer J.J. McCullough arguing in the Washington Post today that the position should be abolished. Do you have any observations or a strong opinion on that?
Well, on the abolition, I don't, because I haven't paid much attention to this very controversial issue. But I would say is that this is an opportunity that Prime Minister and his office should be reflecting on, and to see how to improve this process for the next election.
Yeah. This isn't going to be a surprise to you. A bunch of people that are hitting me up on Twitter, you know exactly what I'm going to ask you about. A bunch of people on the live chat here going, Amarjeet, you going to announce, or what's the deal? You going to run for mayor in Edmonton? What's the deal? People want to know. Obviously, it's been kind of a crazy year for everybody with regards to some of the challenges we faced. It's been a difficult year for your family, as you've told us in a previous interview, and I know that there's been a lot on your heart and a lot on your mind. Have you reached any clarity, or have you reached a decision on whether or not you'll seek election to serve Edmonton as the next mayor?
I have been approached by a number of people on this issue, asking me to consider or explore at least whether I want to take on this responsibility or not. I have lived in Edmonton for 39 years now, Ryan. I am vested in this city. I love this city. I came to this city with little. I had nothing when I came. I couldn't speak the language, I couldn't understand the culture, and didn't have anyone else other than the love and and compassion of my brother who passed away, and his wife Rajinder, who still guides me through these difficult times. Right. So I have spoken with her. I have spoken with some of my other family members and friends. Out of respect for those who want me to consider, I will meet with them and talk to them. I want to continue to give back. I want to continue to make our community better. And because I live here, this is my home, and I want the opportunities that I was able to have in this country, in this city. Want to make sure that those opportunities exist for other people too, right? And so we want to build continue to build a better city, and I want to give back and continue to play a role in it. But what role will I play? It's still uncertain in my mind. But I'm going to be spending more time over the next weeks and months connecting with Edmontonians, understanding if I were to take on this responsibility, am I the right person? Right? What does Edmonton need? And the aspirations of Edmontonians. I really need to understand that before I make that decision.
I'm just gonna. Sam will keep the 2-shot here, so I'm looking at my big monitor right now, and I want to just study your face as I workshop this theory to see if your face cracks a little bit, to see if you give us a hint. I have to imagine there are at least 2 factors at play, and probably more. Number one, if you saw a strong candidate or a candidate you could get behind declare their candidacy for mayor, potentially that may dissuade you from running. Whereas if you see that people that trouble you may have some momentum in a mayoral campaign, potentially you step in to save the day. The other thing I wonder about, which is potentially more significant, is whether or not the prime minister decides to drop the writ and call another federal election this spring or into this year. I have to imagine you would love another run at that riding, and I have to imagine that you think your chances might be a little bit better in which was a relatively close race there in Edmonton Mill Woods. Have you ruled out another run for a federal seat, returning as MP, and I have to assume as a minister again?
I haven't really decided whether I want to come back into politics. A lot has happened over the last year and a half in my family, issues, challenges that I talked about, and in our last interview, Ryan, and very painful experiences. But I will say this, that this country has given me so much, and it has given me so much in a way that I have a roof over my head. I have a loving family. I have friends who care for me. I have a community that is safe in which I live. I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I have all those things. And there are thousands of hundreds of millions of people in our country that don't have those opportunities. So I have a role to play. What that role is, I don't know. I will be involved in my community, I will in my country, and make sure we will continue to move forward in a way that we are building a society where no one is left behind. That if someone like me come from a foreign country, and this country creates opportunities for me to be successful, I see potential in that just imagine if everyone is given the opportunities that I had, what this country can be. And so I will continue to play that role. Which way, which form, that I still don't know.
Amarjeet, I want to thank you for your time, but before we say goodbye, I want a very special person. I know you care about her very deeply, so do I, wants me to deliver a personal hello. Sherry Arsenault, of course, has committed her life to challenging Canada's drunk driving laws and even provincial legislation like we saw a short time ago, in memory and in honor of her son, Bradley, who she lost along with his closest friends in a horrific crash. Yeah. She wanted me to say hello personally. She says, Amarjeet met with me so many different times, truly a great politician, but more importantly, a great person. A reminder, I think, that so much of what politicians do is outside of that arena where everyone's throwing bombs at each other. And a lot of times it's very meaningful work behind the scenes.
Well, I know. Thank you, Sherry. Being a public servant is an honor, and you get to meet so many wonderful people with their pain, their anxiety, and their aspirations, and how they see their world change because of, in this case, somebody being very irresponsible and being on the road while intoxicated. And in public office, you get to meet so many people, and it's enriching and it's rewarding. And so thank you.
Amarjeet Sohi, always great to check in with you. Thanks for your insight on Keystone XL, on the Governor General's resignation, and maybe on the Falls mayoral race. It's always nice to connect.
Thank you, Ryan.
There you go. The live chat right now, always interesting. This from Kim, who says a toxic boss is bad. She's talking about Julie Payette. Says letting the Governor General go is good. I mean, technically, everybody's saying she resigned, right? But there was some obfuscation there. You know, she resigned after a conversation with the Prime Minister.
She can't actually be fired.
You know, you can't. Yeah, so it's kind of
Queen
like
has to fire.
But if you're going to say like you're out, right? The Prime Minister can say you're out, and you're out. We'll let you resign. We see that in workplaces. We've seen it sometimes, I think, with coaches in sport. But Kim goes on to say, letting the Governor General go is good, but a woman becoming a toxic boss is a symptom of toxic work environments. It's a cycle, and it relates to misogyny, and we need to do better. Tracy wonders, has anybody combed? This is an interesting sidebar. Tracy wonders, has anybody combed through Chrystia Freeland's background? I'd personally like to see her leading the Liberal Party. I feel like people see Chrystia Freeland as the leader in waiting.
Oh, I've seen her as that for quite a while.
Although, leadership races can always be surprising.
They can.
Right?
Absolutely they
ask
can.
Ed Stelmach, right?
Yeah. Come from behind.
Nobody expected Ed Stelmach to lead the PCs in Alberta to become premier, but he did. I mean, leadership races can...
No, quite frankly, no one expected Alison Redford to win either.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right after Stelmach.
Fair enough.
Too,
She rallied all the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
She got the teachers on board, Alison Redford did, to win that leadership race, and then cut a whole bunch from education. Sandra says, I see the reason that Jason Kenney's getting so angry at Biden and Trudeau about KXL is that, people are he's attempting to deflect people from holding him responsible to his decisions. Yeah. A lot of people are asking, if we're going to talk about this. Now, as soon as I say, this is great, Sam, I'm going to use this all the time. The fact you can take my screen and show everybody what's on my screen. Conservative MLA out of Calgary just went off over the weekend on a thread of tweets. And one of them, taking on Janice Irwin, the Edmonton MLA, the NDP MLA, Nick Milken says, here's the thing. So Janice Irwin, let me scroll down here so you can see what she's talking about. So this is Jason Kenney on Fox News, right? Over the weekend, and Janice Irwin, an MLA out of Edmonton, says, I'm just here for the hilarious ratio. Now, if you're getting ratioed, ratio is this right here, okay? So you have 17 retweets. I know this makes me say, oh, you can't see my mouse. Oh, that's an interesting bit of the software, Sam, because I'm circling. I'm trying to here anyway. Regardless, you can see there.
We have to get you a pen like sports broadcasters.
That's a great idea. Or like old school weather forecasters. But when you have 16 likes and 140 comments, you're getting ratioed. I kind of got ratioed over the weekend, as a matter of fact, talking about bringing back healthcare premiums. But it was a great conversation. I love it.
Also involved Janice Irwin.
So Milliken decides that he can make hay on this, and he says, and if you're reading this right now and you're going, what does that have to do with anything? The answer is nothing. The fact that he's a 41-year-old married father of two has nothing to do with anything. That's what we call a dog whistle. So because Janice is not 41 and is not married and is not a father of two, she's that doesn't describe her situation. So as a 41-year-old married father of two, I can say Janice Irwin's laugh-filled reaction to Alberta losing jobs is disgusting. We get recall legislation this spring, thank God. Our government is the one that's doing it. Hers didn't. That from Nicholas Milliken. So people are saying, well, Ryan, do you have comment on that? You can offer comment on it. I think that it kind of speaks for itself. Number one, let me let you know that Janice Irwin's already confirmed she's going to join us on our Friday roundtable this week, which is going to be great. I'm very much looking forward to it as well, because we're bringing back one of my favorite conservative voices. If you nerd out on Alberta politics, and if you remember the Wild Rose era, and I know a lot of you are going to go, "Hey, don't be talking like that's a thing of the past." Don't be talking like that. We're keeping an eye on it. But back in the day when Brian Jean was leading Alberta's Wild Rose Party, Vitor Marciano was his key staffer. He was his right-hand man. And Vitor is actually a delightful guy. And he and I have shared a few frosty pints on a few nice hot summer days. And Vitor came out of nowhere over the weekend and actually sided with Janice Irwin in criticizing me on the idea of bringing back healthcare premiums. Vitor said, here I am agreeing with Janice Irwin. And he went on to talk about why he thinks it's a bad idea. I thought, it's not every day that you'll see a former Wild Rose senior staffer and an NDP MLA aligning on something, most especially with regards to healthcare funding. I thought we need to get the two of you on the show together. So they've agreed. So Friday, 9 o'clock, Janice Irwin, Vitor Marciano are going to join us. And I'm thinking of maybe bringing in a third for a fulsome roundtable conversation, bring in somebody else who's done some work in health policy or who can talk about, why or why not healthcare premiums are a good or a terrible idea. And I'm looking forward to that conversation. With regards to Nicholas Milliken's tweets, he's an irrelevant MLA. Quite frankly, of any of the MLAs, if you look at win margin and if you look at current trends, popularity, and polling, if there were to be recall legislation that would actually allow constituents a meaningful opportunity to recall their MLAs, he would likely be, aside from Pat Rain and Lesser Slave Lake, Nicholas Milliken would be one on the chopping block. He'd be one that would be keeping a pretty keen eye on his rearview mirror. He'd be one that could be, and I won't say easily recalled because the legislation will make it very difficult for people to be recalled. The idea really of the legislation, I think, is to dissuade dissenting MLAs from trying to cross the floor or leave their party. I think that's what really it's all about. But Nicholas Milliken, the thing for me that needs to be called out, and if we're going to talk about real talk, the real talk is as a 41-year-old married father of two, I'd like to see some journalists, I'd like to see one reporter get an opportunity to ask MLA Milliken on the record, what does that mean, man? How is that relevant? Why would you invoke the fact that you're 41 has nothing to do with anything, married has nothing to do with anything, and father of two really has nothing to do with anything? People are oftentimes fond of talking about virtue signaling. This might be some sort of strange homophobic way of virtue signaling. I'm not sure, but I do think that Mr. Milliken owes to his constituents in Calgary Curry and probably to Albertans in general an explanation of exactly why it's relevant in talking to a single gay MLA, why it's relevant that he would be married and a father of two before he offers his hot take on jobs and pipelines. I think that Mr. Milliken owes Albertans an answer to that question and probably owes MLA Irwin an apology. We'll get her opinion on that. Some of you are saying, well, why didn't you ask Rachel Notley about it? It has nothing to do with Rachel Notley. It has everything to do with Nicholas Milliken and Janice Irwin and the constituents of Calgary Curry. So there you go. Coming up a little, huh? No, if you're going to interrupt, you got to go. So you interrupted. So
my important question is Janice going to borrow your jacket for the interview?
She wanted it.
Yeah.
The blue one.
The blue one.
Yeah, the blue jacket. She
I feel like you're trading jackets for ties with her.
I felt like an endorsement of Janice Irwin on the fashion front was one that I would take. The team at Westworld Computers wants to remind you that right now, if you're looking to upgrade your gear, but maybe you don't have the budget to do it all with brand new stuff, whether it's a watch or an iPhone or an iMac, MacBook, they've got all of their certified Apple pre-owned products reloaded with the original software and with a warranty. So whether you're looking for new or refurbished, Westworld Computers is your source for all things Apple, all things Mac. For more than 40 years, they've been family owned, and you can find them off Mayfield Road in Edmonton. Park Power is ready to compete for your business. They know that you're going to get your natural gas, your electricity, your internet somewhere. Why not bring your business to the company that operates right here in Alberta? It's locally owned, and it's employing Alberta workers in customer service, their call center. If you use the promo code 2021-RealTalk, 2021-RealTalk at parkpower.ca, it's $70 off your first bill. Also excited to remind you that the team at Eden Landscaping is ready to go now. You're going, it's like a cold snap like we haven't seen. The ground is frozen. There's snow everywhere. Ryan, what are you talking about? Well, it's never too early to start planning out your dream space, whether it's your front yard, your backyard, a flower box, or a total overhaul. They're using Zoom, even Google Earth to take a look at your property and start dreaming with you. You can check them out online. Just follow the links to the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. Here's an interesting trend that the team at the Podboard 100 and Podicon has been keeping a keen eye on. You know, we saw that President Donald Trump booted from Twitter. He had his Twitter account suspended. And we've seen more and more of this type of activity. You know, Parler, for example, this conservative messaging platform, deplatformed by Amazon. There's been a lot of talk about censorship, QAnon's role in fueling some of the conspiracy theories that were evident, very apparent on that January 6th act of domestic terrorism on Capitol Hill. So where are all the voices going? People say that Trumpism gave some of these individuals a voice, and now they're scurrying away, never to be heard from again. But that quite simply is not the case. And it's a trend that's important for all of us to be aware of. Stephen Brogarth is managing director of Podicon and the Podboard 100. 14 years experience keeping an eye on live digital events. And they've, for the last year, been monitoring podcasts around the world, including right here in Canada. Stephen, kind enough to, I guess, stay up late for us to a certain degree as he checks in live from Stockholm, Sweden. Welcome to Real Talk. Thanks for making time for us.
No problem. Good to see you, Ryan.
Yeah, Stephen, for people that aren't familiar with what you're doing with the Podboard 100, can you explain what it's all about?
Sure. So very, very quickly, there's four of us. We were friends prior to starting this project. We basically got into a discussion one day about what we thought was the most listened to podcast on the planet. Some people obviously pointed out Joe Rogan. Others were suggesting things like a daily news, like the New York Times Daily, things like that. And two of the four of us are very tech-orientated people. And so they wanted to start monitoring it themselves because they weren't 100% sure on the iTunes data that's provided, which pretty much every chart out there is just a copy of that. So what we did is we, of course, use iTunes data, but we also use data from multiple podcast players. So it includes other Android users. And also we have created a metric which factors in social media activity of people who listen to podcasts. And by doing that, we feel we have kind of dealt with a bit of a problem in charting podcasts, which is what you call legacy subscribers. So we really find, or we're trying to find, the people that are actually listening now, rather than people that subscribed to a podcast 2 years ago, never unsubscribed, but haven't listened for the last year.
So this formula, this algorithm, whatever you might call it, gives you a sense of who's engaged, which podcasts are drawing out the most engagement, which ones are the most listened to, as opposed to which ones may be simply the most downloaded but never touched in an archive library like that. So it gives you a real clear sense of which podcasts are seeing skyrocketing popularity early out of the gates, which brings us to what we're talking about here. Which is some of these voices that are being stifled or censored or muted or shut down, however you want to put it, on other platforms like Twitter. What have you been noticing?
So, I mean, it really, you can watch the trend back to, was it the 6th of January, the Capitol? Yep. And then quickly after that, obviously Trump was banned from Twitter, and as you've mentioned, Parler and stuff like that. And overnight, we started seeing on the USA chart, particularly on the Podboard 100 chart, that people who had never charted on the top 100 podcasts of that day were just littering the chart. And I mean, I know I've been in and out of your show today, but I know you've got some new tech. You don't have to scroll very far today to find a perfect example. I mean, the number 2 podcast in America today is a perfect example of what we're talking about. It's a guy called Graham Allen, Dear America. And, you know, look, there has always been right-wing commentary political commentary, as there should be. You know, we're talking people like Ben Shapiro. I wouldn't necessarily classify him as anything of an extremist. And of course, there's left-wing commentary as well. But what we've seen since these people have been removed from social media is that it seems that their voice is now being heard via podcasts, and their numbers are skyrocketing daily. And where we might have had, say, 3 or 4 right-wing podcasts to, let's say, 3 or 4 left-wing, we're now on a daily basis, it can be anywhere from sort of 20 to 30 right-wing. Now, I also want to clarify something as well. You know, number 3 on the chart is Sean Hannity. Is he an extremist? Probably not. Well, he's not, you know, but is he Republican leaning? 100%. Was he a fan of Trump? It's hard to argue that he wasn't, based on the 4 years coverage up until about a month ago, when, you know, all of a sudden people turned their backs on him. But, you know, we're not necessarily talking about people like him. There's been some, they're not on today, but over the weekend we had 2 QAnon podcasts charting in the top 100 podcasts in America of that day. And, you know, I think one of the disturbing things is, you know, there's only so much you can say in 140 characters in a tweet. These are long form podcasts where they're talking for 2-3 hours, you know. But there's loads of interesting things that come from this. And I don't just want to focus on the fact that there's right-wing extreme podcasts on the Football 100. I think what's super interesting is podcasting as a platform itself, and what could be done if we wanted to silence the voices on podcasts, and do we want to do that?
Stephen, like that's the most important thing. Like, this is the most, because you're providing us with information, you're pointing out a trend. You know, you're saying as more and more of these voices are silenced or muted on social media platforms, like, you know, Twitter would be one example. TikTok might be another. I mean, Trump's been banned on Shopify and Pinterest. And I mean, basically every platform came out and said he can forget about it. But there will be many people, regardless of political affiliation or leaning, that will say this is a concerning trend. People will say whether or not, you know, it's not necessarily automatically the right move to silence voices with whom you do not agree. Now, I'm not talking about hate speech. I think there are real concerns about QAnon, the fact that, you know, a guy shows up with an assault rifle to a pizza joint because he believes there's a child pornography ring in the basement, or people storm the American Capitol and find themselves under FBI investigation. 5 people die because people believe these conspiracy theories. That is reason for concern, but I'm not convinced that the number one go-to move automatically needs to be silence the voices. As a matter of fact, that really concerns me. How are you sorting this out in your own mind?
Yeah, so I agree. And I want to stress categorically, you know, us at Podicon and Football 100, we are literally just showing what people are listening to. There's no preference, there's no preferential treatment anyone gets. The fact of the matter is, and you can't silence people on this platform. And what I mean by that is, sure, Apple could remove them from iTunes, so it becomes a slightly harder thing for people to find. But, you know, and a perfect example of this is Alex Jones. He is banned on all platforms. You cannot search for him. If you do search for him on some of the Android podcast players, he can appear, but they don't. The episodes don't download. But he gets so many listeners, viewers to his show via his own website, and it gets to a point where you won't be able to stop it. And, you know, social media is essentially a members club, and they are entitled and set their own rules. And if you break those rules, of course, you can be banned. But I think what's interesting about podcasting is that there really is not a lot people could do to stop it altogether. Which and you know, we interviewed you, Ryan, recently on a podcast, and you mentioned the network sort of shackles which you don't have now you've moved on to this sort of platform. It has to work both ways, right? And of course, and it's, I was listening to your first guest today, Professor Tom Caulfield, and I think there's an interesting synergy here, because, you know, it is quite disturbing that, 20% of Canadians just won't have the vaccine, or saying they won't have the vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, well, here in our home province of Alberta, some of the polling is showing that more than 50% are, or at least vaccine hesitant. So 1 in 2.
Yeah, and obviously I can give my personal opinion on that, which is I think that's nuts, and I think science tells you that. But I think it's way too blurry as to when it becomes an opinion versus, say, hate speech. Now, you know, Alex Jones, I think, again, mentioning his name, but I think he recently, I think it was I think it might have been yesterday or certainly Friday or over the weekend. I know he's going to be in deep trouble now because a ruling was made about some of the things he said about Sandy Hook, for example. And that's on him, right? But and that's on his platform. It doesn't mean it will be shut down. It just means that he will probably lose a lot of money in court defending his right to do so. But I think that the key to this really is, and really what our chart is highlighting is that, sadly, whether you like it or not, you know, people want to hear this content, and people are hearing this content. Yeah, and it's also, there's one other thing that's been super interesting as well, because at the same time as these podcasts start climbing up the chart, so have Christian religious podcasts as well. So it's almost like there was a whole bunch of people who are new to the world of podcasting, and they're finding podcasts and they're starting to listen to podcasts. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, Christian podcasts, if that's the thing. But there's a definite correlation in that as well, which I think you can start to then make kind of generalizations / perceptions of the people who are sort of increasing the listener numbers of these podcasts.
I'm looking at the Podboard 100 right now. We can take a look at it, Sam. I don't, Stephen, you'll have to walk me through some of these, you know, so here you are on your list, trending number 1 right now, Bill Gates, Rashida Jones.
Yeah.
There's Graham Allen, as you said, 2, Sean Hannity, 3. Take us through some of these.
Yeah. So, I mean, Sean Hannity, he's Fox News, right? One of their main anchors. So obviously right leaning. Ben Shapiro, a lot of people know he's arguably one of the biggest podcasts in the world after Joe Rogan. Next to him, Charlie Kirk, that's very right-wing. The Dave Ramsey show is 100% right-leaning. Dan Bongino is getting pretty hardcore.
You've got some You've got some lefties in there too, though. Like you know,
100%. I mean, what a day, for example. That's pretty strong to the left. But Candace Owens, again, that's, you know, you've got Steve Bannon's The War Room. I mean, you know, next to Megyn Kelly, and, you know, Glenn Beck, Mark Levin, Dinesh D'Souza.
What I think is really interesting here, Stephen, is you point out, you know, what happened on January 6th and then January 7th, and Trump being deplatformed, and Parler being deplatformed by Amazon, and then all of a sudden, what you see on the Podboard 100 is you go from about 10% of podcasts on your top list being sort of more right wing leaning to 30% in a day or two. Regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of which way you lean politically, regardless of which podcast you subscribe to, that's just simply interesting. That's a trend to be keeping an eye on. It gives us a sense of where a lot of these voices are going.
Absolutely. And that's all it is. And it's look, I reached out to you with this like a week or so ago, and it's had very, very little press coverage. I think the Associated Press picked up on it at the end of last week. But when it's such a big story, Trump being banned from these platforms, and I believe the hashtag was the Twitter cull, where it was sort of cracking down on these kind of extreme, I don't want to call them extremists, but the extreme people with super right leaning views.
I don't want to call them extremists, just people with extreme views.
Well,
okay.
Actually, do you know what? I will change that to. I think with Twitter, what it really was people who, even after the insurgents, were still Trump supporting, heavily Trump supporting, and you know what happened on the 6th was, it's hard to call that anything but extreme, right? So
it was a terrorist attack.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as I said, what's super interesting is it was overnight, and they haven't left yet. And I think that the as I said, there was a lot of press coverage about this Twitter cull and Parler, but it's almost like that there's a sort of celebratory, haha, we've silenced them, when you haven't at all.
Epiphanies of Tiffany is watching live on our live chat, says free speech is one thing, have at her, but whether or not these private companies like social media platforms allow you to say it's within their right to do so. You agree to it when you sign up. Heather Wilson says banning people who constantly spread misinformation and lies, I have no problem with. People who are encouraging hate should be banned. I have issues when it's just differences of opinion. Heather, I'm with you. Some random guy says, incidentally, the more that people tell these folks they're wrong, the more they use it as evidence that they're fighting against some kind of malicious force. They want to be heroes. Mac Mers says society is moving in a different direction. I just lost my spot here on the live chat, but here it is. Society is becoming more progressive, and some traditional conservative values are becoming less acceptable to society. This equals censorship and bias and whining about being silenced on the right. Morning Bacon says tolerant society. Morning Bacon, now that's all I'm going to be able to think about. I wish I still had the Friesen Brothers spot to read. I could tell you all about the Friesen Brothers pepper-cracked smoked bacon. But Morning Bacon says tolerant societies must not tolerate intolerance to remain as such. Letting hate run wild because of freedom of speech is regression. Michael says, I think what Twitter's done in terms of flagging false content needs to be outsourced to a nonpartisan government agency that should have all these types of flagging features on major social sites. I mean, I do think that probably I'm out of my depth here talking about this, but the CIA and CSIS, and I'm sure the RCMP and FBI, and I'm sure others do have some sort of monitoring tools that are used on social media to identify some of these types of things. So where do you see this going, Stephen? I mean, you're identifying a trend here. It'll be interesting to see, to state the obvious, what it looks like in 6 months or a year from now with the growth of some of these pods.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, again, and going back to the podcast you've done with us, I think it's touched on quite a lot in that. Look, traditional media is changing. There's a flip, right? And you are yourself particularly excited about the freedom, the ability to kind of control your own content. It's the same for everybody, right? So if we start shackling one side, it becomes, I think in many ways the platform starts becoming no different to a traditional network, which I don't think yourself or anybody would necessarily want. I actually myself joked on Twitter when I first noticed this about how I'd happily take a job with the FBI of just listening to podcasts every day and identifying hate speech. But I do actually think that there might be something there, and lines have, if lines are crossed, lines are crossed. I'm not someone that believes free speech means you can say whatever you want. That's certainly, that's just my opinion. That's not the case.
Well, you can say whatever you want, but you're free to deal with the consequences, right? I mean, we say freedom of speech without freedom from consequence, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we seeing this? Let me ask you this, Sam. Let's take the screen. I want to see because you have charts in. So we see America, Canada, the UK, Australia, and Sweden. People can check out podboard100.com. Canada's hottest podcasts. Are we seeing? Isn't this subtle of me to do this? Are we?
This entire interview is a subtle
This
way of
entire
you doing
interview
this.
was a build up to this moment. And I'm partially to blame that we're not number one because I downloaded and listened to Spit and Chicklets over the weekend. I'm happy to see we're ahead of Bill Gates in Canada. But are we seeing, you know, what's really interesting, number one, Stephen, is you're seeing a lot of American or international podcasts top trending in Canada. I don't think that's necessarily a surprise. But are we saying, we're not seeing, I'm looking for so-called right-wing, they don't seem to be as, like, where are they? They're not as popular in Canada, are they?
No. It is primarily American. How much you can take of this, take out of it, I don't know. There has potentially been a minor increase in Australia. But again, I think it's really important to separate someone like Ben Shapiro versus someone like Graham Allen, right? They're not the same. And
Ben Shapiro's mainstream, whether you like him or not, he's mainstream, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas, you know, if you clicked on Graham Allen's show and scrolled down and looking at the titles of his shows, you know, there was a lady who was on the charts over the weekend that dropped off. I mean, I think Monica Matthews, I think was her name. I mean, essentially Alex Jones tribute acts, right? That they're full on, it's all a conspiracy, and you know, Joe Biden is a lizard who's
right
going to eat your babies.
Right.
And you know, as I said, we've had internal conversations about it. Are we promoting it? Are we doing the right thing with the fact that we are just essentially showing the data that we have? And as it stands right now, we will continue to show the chart that is true, and that is the chart, right? There's not a lot else
yeah
we can do. And as I said, you know, of course there's certain things we could do, and there's certain things Apple could do, and there's certain things Spotify could do. But if anything, I would say that what I think this trend shows is that when things like happen with Twitter and Parler and removing these people from there, it almost intensifies the kind of culture, the sort of core fan base of these people that, you know, so by removing them or maybe showing them, but you can't play them directly through the Podboard 100, does that intensify and show them, yeah, you know, they're trying to silence us, which again, and we can go round and round and round, should they be silenced? But, you know, that really isn't for us to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something that you and I wouldn't solve here, and I'd put out to our audience, and Real Talkers are already chiming in on that. That's a conversation that deserves to be had, and I'm happy to have it. I err on the side. I'm really concerned when voices are stifled and silenced. I don't think that it solves the problem. But I also think, you know, I mean, to talk about Donald Trump specifically, he was inciting a riot. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Donald Trump ultimately face charges and face consequences for the role that he played in inciting that violence on January 6th of 2021. And I don't think that story's over yet. So when you have somebody, you know, in the Oval Office using a platform to send thousands of people to try to lynch the vice president, I think that social media platforms like Twitter have a role to play. But if we start talking about, you know, different opinions on the environment, or different opinions on vaccines, or different opinions on what happens when you die, it really concerns me when people talk about silencing those voices, because I don't think you solve the problem. I think you drive them further underground. And sometimes I think it's more important to be shining light into the dark corners. But hey, I wanted to thank you and the team for including me in your Behind the Pod Season 1, Episode 1. I know you've just officially released it this morning. It was a total pleasure for me to check in with you and your team, and I want to thank you for that and encourage Real Talkers to check it out. We talked for more than an hour, and no question left unasked. It was a good conversation. I appreciate it. Stephen, thanks for making time for us from Stockholm.
No problem. Thanks, Ryan.
You bet. Stephen Brogarth, he's managing director of the Podboard 100 and Podicon. And make sure to check them out. Give them a follow at Podboard 100. It's interesting what they do, using their algorithms to talk about which podcasts are trending the highest, which are the most listened to, not just most downloaded, most listened to. Pretty interesting stuff. I want to put it out there. This was Carrie, my wife, over the weekend, she said she may feel like I'm throwing her under the bus right now. She said there's something that I do on the air. You know, every broadcaster has a crutch, has bad habits, something that they say all the time. She said you say you appreciate things too much. I said, well, is that
a very appreciative guy?
Very appreciative guy. I said, well, is that just because I'm a Canadian broadcaster that I'm always telling our guests how much I appreciate that they join us? I appreciate they made time for us. She goes, hey, she said, you say it a lot. I said, okay, well, I'll try to be more of a jerk.
So you have a go-to verb. Like, so
I'll try to be less appreciative. I'll try to be less appreciative. I'm curious to know what real talkers are saying about this. The assertion, or not the assertion, because that's not fair to characterize what Steven said, but the idea that unpopular voices, and then again, based on what? Unpopular according to who, right? Unpopular voices aren't always unpopular depending on who you talk to, right? Kim says, science, there's more fact than opinion. What we don't know is not an opinion void to fill. It's what we don't know. We're waiting for scientists to fill the void with facts. Yeah, I mean, you can let me know what you think. I'm really hesitant to endorse. I'm hesitant to endorse deplatforming unpopular opinions. I'm not talking about hate speech. I'm not talking about people inciting violence. But I think we need to be hesitant around endorsing this type of thing. If you think I'm way off, you can let me know. You can let me know. Am I way off on this? I don't think so.
I don't think you're way.
People talk about cancel culture these days. This is the whole idea.
I mean, the part that, like, do I like the fact that Donald Trump is no longer on Twitter? Oh yeah. It's like the whole world does not hang on his tweets now, but
but like 70 million people voted for him too, right?
Well, and like Parler was born because the extreme right was upset with Twitter and was upset with some of the more mainstream communities, was upset with even places like Reddit was censoring them. So they made their own space, and then it got shut down because Amazon, the company that owns the servers that they were on, also said, no, you can't do that here. And I mean, we're seeing private media companies make private media choices about who gets to play on the terms on their platform. And I think that's fine. We have to realize that being on Twitter is not a right. It's a privilege. You sign up and you agree to play by their rules. Now, as for the whole silencing podcast things, I mean, there's, I think, a little bit more choice whether you download them or not. I mean, like it or not, unfortunately, the whole world had to hang on Donald Trump's tweets because there were policy decisions implicated in them. And
he's the president.
Yeah, there was world matters like implicated in the things that Donald Trump tweets on the toilet at 3 a.m.
Yeah. Why'd you have to give us that visual,
Sam? It's true.
On his golden toilet. Hope says, you can't help those that won't listen to reason or facts. I have family that have become radicalized. Scott says, no way, Jesperson. Ben Shapiro is not mainstream. Sandra's wondering, I don't know what happened here, but I know we sometimes will mute or delete people on the live chat if they're like spamming us or if there's inflammatory content. Sandra wonders, is it censorship when we delete two people arguing? I don't know. I didn't see that.
I was just trying to turn the temperature down a bit.
Okay.
I didn't delete them. I paused them.
Oh, you paused? You put them on a timeout?
You can put them on a timeout.
Well, that's good. I stand by putting people. I didn't see what happened. I was not aware. I don't know. Ken makes an interesting point. Ken is drops the odd truth bomb in there. He says, choosing podcasts, that's a choice. He says Facebook's use of algorithms to influence people based on emotions on a platform that pretends to be a family meeting place is a social disaster.
Okay, here's a hot take. I would pay for Facebook if it had no algorithm. If I could pay a monthly fee to use Facebook and have nothing served to me by an algorithm, it's just the people I choose to interact with, that's a world I want to live with.
But I bet you if Facebook introduced pay to play, I bet you they'd lose 90% of their users. There's already people are already leaving Facebook in droves. It's still a very important platform. I don't know if people would pay for it. And also, algorithms aren't always bad. They're freaky, but they're not always bad.
No.
If I start talking right now, this can be a thought experiment, but if I start talking about replacing our espresso machine at home, and I'm saying it in front of my laptop that's open and my social media, even if they're open or not, and I don't totally get how it goes, but you know what's going to start showing up?
You're going to get ads for espresso machines.
I'm going to start getting ads for espresso machines. And I'm not actually sure. I mean, it's creepy, but I don't know if that's bad. Are algorithms inherently bad? Not really. Are people say, well, I was talking about a trip to Hawaii, and then all of a sudden I started getting emails about, deals to fly to Hawaii. Freaky, but also convenient.
My favorite bit with that is I'll often be the way that goes the other way is I'll be planning a trip and I'll be booking my return flight, and all of a sudden I'll get nothing but ads for things to do in Edmonton. It's like, no, you don't really know me that well, do you, Internet?
Yeah. How about this one from Mace One Pride? I'm just going to read it. Don't shoot the messenger. Mace One Pride says, social media has changed so much since its inception. Facebook started as a way to rate hot girls, and now it can turn elections. It needs to adjust, possibly with independent oversight.
There's a lot of truth in that.
I was going to say the assertion's actually not wrong at all.
Not one bit.
Not one bit. We'll keep the conversation going. You can let me. I'm curious to see what Real Talkers are going to send us in the email inbox right now, because it's a pretty. This is a conversation that requires some sober thought and analysis, I think, and we'll continue to have these conversations around silencing voices and it's a big conversation, obviously, and I would imagine there's no right or wrong, there's no black or white here. There are probably some black or white elements to the conversation, but generally speaking, I think it's something that, it's good fodder for a talk show. Let's put it that way. Wanted to get into a little bit of the results from our question of the week here, but before we wrap the show, we had about 1,150 of you, 1,149 of you complete the Real Talk Get Real question of the week presented by our friends at Y Station, their official research and strategy partner here at Real Talk. We asked you last week, with Joseph R. Biden sworn in as the 46th president of the United States, replacing the 45th President Trump, you cannot deny that President Donald Trump had a huge impact on Canada-U.S. relations, the office of the presidency. So we asked you for your thoughts on the two presidents. Again, about 1,150 of you chimed in. Let's take a look at these, Sam. When it came to the assertion, we give you statements and we ask you to tell us how you feel about the statements. We said President Biden will be good for the United States. 81% of respondents believe that to be correct. You agree, right? Basically, 76. Look at these numbers. President Biden will be good for the world. These are relatively favorable. Until you get down to President Biden will be good for Canada, less than half of you necessarily believe that. President Biden will be good for Keystone XL, the number negligible. On a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree, so that's how we come up with the numbers here, the large majority of you agree that Donald Trump ruined red baseball caps forever. Donald Trump will continue to be one of the most powerful figures in American politics. Not everybody agrees with that, as you can see by the numbers. And even fewer believe that this is the beginning of a Trump dynasty in American politics. You remember people talked about Don Jr. or Ivanka, I think was maybe the more serious suggestion. People started talking about Barron Trump. I have to imagine that maybe being president of the United States might be the last thing that Barron Trump would want.
I'm curious if he would want nothing to do
I
with it.
feel bad for that guy.
Yeah.
What is he, probably 12 now or 13, something like that? 12? Yeah. I feel terrible for Barron Trump. I feel terrible for, anyway, I'm not even going to get into that. Very few of you believe that President Donald Trump was good for Canada. Very few of you believe that President Trump was good for the world. And look at this. Donald Trump made America great again. Right there at the bottom. Okay, so here are some poll quotes, and this is kind of interesting. What change are you hoping to see President Biden bring about? These are the type. This is called a top line report. This is what we get from Y Station, so this is really interesting. These are the comments that you left. What change are you hoping to see? Heal the division in America. Fighting COVID-19. One of you said, kill the pipeline. Starting the prioritization of fossil fuels to green energy tech and a serious approach on climate change. Focus on equal rights for all Americans, especially LGBTQ2S plus Americans. Turning down the temperature in American politics and restoring humanity to the office of the president. Now, if you check out our website right now, if you go to ryanjesperson.com, you will see our Get Real question of the week for this week is posted. In partnership with Y Station, the last week, we've seen a lot of developments and debate about Alberta's energy sources and discussion about our energy future. We want to know what you think about how to deal with the resources we have and what place they have in our future. So we're asking you about pipelines. We're asking you about coal. And I would love if you would take us up on our invitation to take 2 minutes or so. It's how we know where Real Talkers stand on the issues that matter. And of course, this is a big driver when it comes to our editorial policy. So we thank you in advance for answering our question of the week. Well, Alta Moving and Storage is ready for you if 2021 means a move is in your future. And they've got these pod-style containers. This is where moving's going. This is where moving has gone. This is the new trend as more and more people say that moving for, an apartment, a condo, a house, this is one of the most stressful things you're ever going to do in your entire life. It's like public speaking, moving. I mean, those are all right at the top of the list. Well, they take the stress out of it with their team of local employees here ready to do whatever you need to make sure it's a perfect fit. They've got those frog boxes as well, eco-friendly moving boxes, and short and longer term storage solutions. So there's no way you're getting rid of grandpa's piano, but you've got nowhere for it now. They can find you a storage solution at Alta Moving and Storage. Make sure you check them out by following the sponsors tab on our website. That's also where you'll find Kubi Energy. Kubi Energy presents Positive Reflections each and every Monday morning. That's coming up in just a second. They are Tesla-certified solar installers with offices in Edmonton and Kamloops. That means their service provision across Western Canada has Red Seal, or rather journeyman electricians, making sure that they're doing all that work safely. Plus, they do all the paperwork for you. You don't have to get the permits, even filling out for those rebates. They do it for you at Kubi Energy. And of course, they make sure that we've got a smile on our face thanks to this little thing we do every week. Yeah, we like to start every week. We like to send you into your Monday on the right foot. It's Positive Reflections presented by Kubi Energy. These are photos, videos, stories that you send us that put a smile on our face and we hope helps you start your week off right. So check this out. Number one, this is from the Robinson family, and we're so grateful for these photos. We want you to meet Obi. The Robinsons welcomed Obi over the weekend, and they thought that Real Talkers would be thrilled to make the acquaintance too. That's right. This is Obi, and Obi has been a very, very good pup. Early in the game, Obi is following all the house rules. Obi is learning to go pee-pee exactly where Obi's supposed to pee. I think I could just stare at this photo all morning long. This is absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
and how about
that's the show. We're done.
Should we just wrap right here on Obi? We have a story about IKEA buying a bunch of forest land to preserve the trees and this, that, and the other. But why not just one more shot of Obi? I think you're right, Sam. Override it. Hey, this Monday's for you, Obi. Welcome to Planet Earth. Welcome to the Robinsons' home. And welcome to Real Talk. Friends, we'll chat with you again tomorrow, 8:30 Mountain Time. Make it a great Monday.